Hear me.
Скажи мне, американец, в чем сила?
А вы что, собираетесь на ней жениться?
Да.
Ух, красота-то какая, лепота.
Таможня дает добро.
И вообще не называй меня, пожалуйста, Вероникой. Кто я? Вот кто я?
Отныне русской земле единый быть.
Don't torture me, I can't live without him.
Hello, my name's Ali, and this is the Russophiles Unite podcast, where we watch Russian films and films with some kind of Russian connection. As always, I am joined by a guest, and today my guest is Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Ali. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for letting us use your car as a recording studio.
No problem. I'm glad it can come in use, not just being a vehicle.
Yes, a multi-purpose vehicle. So, Matt, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Matt. I'm an editor at the British Medical Journal for their medical students audience. And that's pretty much what I do. During the day, I've got two small kids who are 3 years and 1 year old. And yeah, my interest in Russian film is actually there's an interest there, but I haven't really experienced many films in Russian language or about Russia. So I suppose what we're going to see today and what we're going to talk about is a sort of hopefully a start to that.
Okay. I hope it's a good one. Now, I understand in your job as a journalist, you're quite often sort of the other side of the mic, as it were, as far as doing interviews. What does it feel like to be the other side?
It feels a bit sort of on being put on the spot, but that's okay. I think it's just sort of it's just a chat, isn't it? So it's fine. I sort of know the sort of tropes and the kind of questions that usually come up. So hopefully it'll be all right.
I'll try not to throw you too many curveballs. So the film we're watching today is not actually a Russian film. It's a British film. It is by Armando Iannucci, and it is catchily titled "The Death of Stalin." Now, we've kind of talked about this before, I think, kind of Armando Iannucci fans. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I followed all his work from the day-to-day all the way to the thick of it to what's the American show called?
Veep.
Yes, Veep as well. So yeah, I'm very well versed in his work, and I suppose I've seen In the Loop, which is one of his films. So this is another one, slightly different angle, I suppose, where he sort of he's not come from a series that I know. So yeah, interesting to see what he does with it.
Well, obviously he's done political stuff before, as you mentioned, The Thick of It and Veep, which I claim to be a Iannucci fan, but I haven't really seen very much apart from the odd clip of either of those. But it's fair to say the stakes in what we're watching today are going to be considerably higher. The thing that particularly interests me is that Armando Iannucci is, very famous as for his sort of linguistic flair, but the film we're seeing today is actually an adaptation of a graphic novel. So it'll be interesting to see whether he's not known for his visual style particularly, but whether he'll sort of rise to the occasion with this.
Yeah, and I was sort of thinking as well, the death of Stalin implies, to me anyway, that there's going to be some violence. So, as you say, his medium is often, being very verbose and cutting, and he's a wordsmith. but I'm interested in seeing what he does, with the physical as well. So I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he can definitely do physical comedy. I mean, the only film of his that I've seen is Alpha Papa, and it's fair to say that not all of the jokes in that one are verbal. There's some pretty good sort of slapsticky type things in there. Do you know much about the cast for this one?
I don't actually. I think them. No, you have to tell me. I might be guessing.
So we've got, at least off the top of my head, we've got Michael Palin is Molotov, is the former foreign minister. So it's always nice to see Michael Palin pop up in a film because he's not in a ton.
No,
because he can really pick and choose what he's gonna be in. One person I'm really excited about seeing in a film is Simon Russell Beale, who I don't think I've seen him in anything. But he's, as I understand it, a very famous stage actor, and also he was Napoleon in a Radio 4 adaptation of War and Peace a few years ago, and he was really good in that, sort of kind of commanding but sort of pompous and vain at the same time. It was really good, so I'm looking forward to seeing him. And then I don't know whether you're a Kermode and Mayo film program listener at all, but listeners of that will enjoy seeing Jason Isaacs.
Yes, I know. Yes, it's the running joke or the running nod to Isaacs.
Yeah, so we should probably say "Здравствуйте, Jason Isaacs." Yeah, so yes, and he's going to be Marshal Zhukov, like the senior Red Army figure. So it's going to be interesting seeing him, because I haven't seen too many films where he plays a main role. He tends to be in the things I've seen him in for about 5 minutes, and it's kind of, is that him? Because tends to be blending into things. I think that's all from the cast. And we're kind of wrapping back around, but have you seen many graphic novel adaptations that you can think of?
The only thing that really springs to mind is Sin City.
Oh, yeah.
Which is obviously quite violent.
Just a little bit.
Which, I think, the last one that I saw was, fantastic. And, obviously that takes very much, the visual element of that is very much sort of like taken from the graphic novel and it's the film version. How this is represented, the Death of Stalin, how that's going to be represented on screen, whether it's going to be like a graphic novel or whether it's just going to be a straight film just based on the graphic novel script. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
Yeah, because Sin City is wearing the fact that its origins on its sleeve, which I suspect this probably won't so much. Another one that I really enjoyed was Persepolis. I don't know if you've seen
the
that.
Iranian revolution.
Yes, where she heads off to France, and that should be mentioned as well, because the original graphic novel for this one, the source material, was actually French. So it was written by Fabien Nury, I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it, and illustrated by Thierry Robin. So the French apparently do like their graphic novels.
So it was written by French authors. It's very interesting. I didn't know that. I assumed it. I don't know why. I assumed it was. I don't know. I think I assumed it was by a Russian author, but
no, just drawing from Russian historical material. Do you know anything at all about the events that the film's going to be depicting? Putting you on the spot there.
Not really. I think I suppose it's going to be about the demise of Stalin, his last days. That's my educated guess.
Yes, yeah. Okay, in that case, I will avoid giving the game away at all then before we start. So I think that probably wraps us up for this beginning part. Although I do have a little thing that we do every time, and that's where I make my guest speak a bit of Russian.
Okay.
It's only one word, and that word is "поехали." And the significance of that is that it is what Yuri Gagarin said when he was blasting off to become the first man in space. So we sort of launch into the film, as it were. So
Hayakli.
that is pretty good. That's pretty good. So after 3, 1, 2, 3, Hayakli. And welcome back. We have just watched The Death of Stalin, and before we get into discussing what we thought, Matt's just going to give us a quick summary of the plot. So away you go, Matt.
Okay, so a very quick summary. We arrive at the film. Stalin and his cronies are having, what would you call a jolly time?
Yeah, a night in.
A night in with the lads. And it's all going very well. And then, is it the morning or the night after, Stalin collapses after receiving a note, which is quite critical of his regime and what he's been doing. And then the rest of the film really is about the aftermath of his death following his collapse, and the sort of grapple for power between the General Committee of the Soviet Union and they're sort of jockeying for position and sort of trying to seize power.
Okay, we've got 2 main, I guess, actors as far as that tussle is concerned. Could you tell us a little bit more about those 2 guys?
So the main 2 actors and their character names, do correct me if I get this wrong. So we've got Beria, that's the character's name, and he was played by Simon Russell Beale. Mm-hmm. And he is the head of the NKVD, which is the predecessor of the KGB, essentially.
Yeah, so it's the Secret Service / Security Forces / people who take you away to the Gulag.
Yeah. And then we've got Khrushchev.
Yeah, so the film goes with the pronunciation Khrushchev, but if you want to be really pedantic about it, it was something more like Khrushchev, but they were sensible enough not to inflict that on the actors.
Okay, and so that guy was played by Steve Buscemi, and I forget what his
job is. Yeah, that's a good point. He's sort of the junior member of the committee. He has some kind of responsibility for transport, I think. So he's a bit of a dark horse.
Okay. And it's all takes place in 1953.
That's quite right. Yep. Okay. So, first of all, it's a comedy. Did you find it funny?
Yes, I did. I think it had a lot of the kind of, I hate this word, the sort of banter that you might expect from previous Iannucci works like The Thick of It. So it definitely had that kind of the sort of cutting banter. So that was funny, and it was quite. I mean, something that was quite noticeable throughout was that, yes, it's about Russian history, but not all the actors, but a lot of the actors were from the UK or US. I think there's 1 or 2 sort of Russian-based actors.
Yeah.
But they were all, given license to just use their natural accents, and that kind of gave a bit of comedy to it, a bit familiarity, and especially the character of Stalin. Is kind of my sort of limited image of him is that he was this big imposing guy, probably had a very kind of strong kind of coarse voice, but then the character in who the guy who plays Stalin is this kind of East End sort of Cockney guy, and it kind of it sort of belittles him in a comedic way, and I felt that was quite a nice touch.
Yeah, it's quite a surprising accent choice. On the other hand, he sounds like a mob boss, like a sort of East End,
yeah.
Which I think when you compare Stalin with Hitler was much more sort of grandstandy and lots of big speeches and rallying up the crowd, whereas Stalin wasn't really one for that. He was much more sort of manipulating people behind the scenes. And there were just a couple of moments in that initial dinner sequence where he'd just give somebody a look, and they would stop, and you'd just see an expression on their face, and they're thinking, "Goodness, am I for it?" You know, I think they did a good job of conveying that sort of intimidation and how scared everyone was of him.
Yeah, definitely sort of the intimidations, the sort of paranoia that's going on. And I think obviously that, as we might discuss, the sort of paranoia between different members of the committee about trying to seize power and who's in jeopardy and that sort of thing. I think that was kind of funny, but also menacing, I suppose. Yeah,
and queasy.
Yeah.
You definitely feel like everyone is implicated. So, any particular standout scenes that you really enjoyed?
I mean, there are quite a few, but I mean, I think there's two things that I think were, favourite scenes. Anything with Stalin in, I think, was really funny, because I just, as I've mentioned, I really liked the way that they kind of, they did turn him into this kind of comedy character, which, as you said, there are kind of transferable qualities to the sort of East End mob boss, but also that was quite funny, and I just really liked the dynamic between the whole kind of committee and Stalin. And then the other thing that I can think of, which was quite funny, was the during the funeral there was the guy Khrushchev, and he was trying to change positions with Georgy Malenkov.
Yeah,
that was quite funny. So they're trying to just change positions during the funeral of Stalin, and basically Georgy doesn't want to do it, but Khrushchev does, and it just
yeah, it's definitely some of the sort of humour of awkwardness that if you're sort of a seasoned Alan Partridge fan, you'll be used to. Yeah.
How about you? Were there any standout?
Yeah, a couple of. I really liked the concert very early on. We have this scene where it's a concerto, and it's going out live on the radio, and just as the thing wraps up, the guy running the broadcast gets a message that the dear leader would like a copy of the recording. Only thing is, they haven't made one, so they have to force everyone to come back, and I think supposedly this was based on a true incident. I don't know how close it was to actual Stalin's death. They make it sound like it happened the night of, or the night before, or in very close proximity to. But I think that that's something we could touch on as we go on. They do play fast and loose with history, but just the tension and the ridiculousness of that was very enjoyable. And the other thing I really liked was one of the committee scenes when you just have this sort of fake manufacturing of consensus, because they have this pretense that because they're communists, they do everything collectively, but it's kind of very much everyone's sort of looking out of the corner of their eye to see what everyone else is.
What the etiquette is.
Yeah.
There was that thing I'm thinking about is the Michael Palin character.
Molotov.
He makes this kind of speech in one of the committee meetings where you don't know which way he's going to, what he's quite saying, on one hand he starts saying something that's like pro particular motion,
course of action, yeah.
And people are kind of raising their hand, and then he sort of flips, and then he says something completely different, and then everyone starts putting their hands down quite gingerly, and then they go back up. That was quite a kind of funny, sort of physical comedy that was quite, that taps into what you were just saying there about, the kind of paranoia, not quite knowing how to sort of play it. Being on the committee.
Because no one is quite sure who's going to be in charge, because early on it's established that it's going to be Malenkov, because officially he's the next in line, but people pretty early on, and I think because they know each other well, they know that he doesn't really have
Yeah.
the kind of the steel to succeed Stalin. Sorry, that's an unintentional pun because Stalin's nickname or the name he chose for himself meant something like Man of Steel.
Oh, okay.
So Stalin, Russian steel. But anyway, sorry, that went a bit Alan Partridge geeky fact there. It's difficult to choose a favourite performance. Do you sort of nominations?
Nominations.
And we do have to come to a consensus about this, so
okay.
Make it a good choice.
Well, I was very, I don't know. I was very pleased to see Steve Buscemi in the film. I didn't know he'd be in it, and I like him anyway, and I like his energy. I mean, Jason Isaacs sort of stands out as well. As he kind of comes in about almost 2/3 through the film. But he still makes quite an impression, and he sort of plays this he's the head of the army, isn't he?
Zhukov. It's a really scenery-chewing performance as well.
So he's quite impactful. I think for me, those two, but do you have any other people you'd like to forward?
I mentioned him in the intro, but Simon Russell Beale as Beria is very, very commanding. He's just, it's interesting because in terms of a physical type, you don't think of him as being someone who would be particularly intimidating because he's this short, waddly, fat guy. He reminds me a little bit of Danny DeVito's The Penguin, in terms of him just being this big kind of dough ball, but he's just so nasty. And there's little details, like at one point he mocks this understandably nervous junior officer's stutter. It's just that sort of little moments of cruelty. You obviously see him torture people as well, so that's more obvious. So that's a really standout performance. But I liked Michael Palin a lot.
Well, I felt he became more prominent as it went on, actually, and that scene I just mentioned about where they were kind of raising their hands, lowering their hands, that was probably a high point for me in the film, and that obviously that was down to him and down to how he delivers it. He was good, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and the real Molotov was an interesting guy in terms of that group, because he was an old Bolshevik, i.e. he was one of the people who joined the party prior to the Russian Revolution, and most of those guys had been purged by Stalin by this point. So they play that up about his character, actually. Not in so many words, but he's quite a pedant about, things have to be done the particular communist way. And there's just examples of sort of double think on his part. Like, again, there's a scene with Beria where Beria, it transpires, has kept his Molotov's wife basically in prison somewhere, and everyone else assumes that she's been executed because that was the order, and he sort of wheels her out, but he makes a big play of getting Molotov to say, what a traitor she was, and then she's just outside. I mean, it's a bit of a trope to have someone say something bad about someone who's in the room, but it was played very differently. It was just kind of like, that's just so nasty. And
but I think that highlights what you were just saying about how that double think, that kind of he's saying stuff, and maybe a lot of people who were in that system were saying stuff that they didn't truly believe, but actually felt that they had to say and had to stick to the party line to be seen to be saying the right thing.
Yeah, and had to convince themselves, because he almost gives himself these sort of little talks occasionally about when he sort of has moments of weakness as far as following the party line. So I think he's sort of the, I guess, unsung performance. I always like seeing Michael Palin in things, because he's a good actor. He probably doesn't necessarily get the credit that he deserves. I wanted to ask you about we touched on it in the opening, the visual style. Was there anything about that was particularly memorable?
Well, we talked before about it being taken from a graphic novel, the storyline, and would they do a sort of Sin City kind of thing, or sort of, I haven't seen the novels, graphic novels, so I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
But would it have some kind of slightly kind of illustrated, or some kind of texture on it? But no, there wasn't. Which is fine. We didn't necessarily need that. In terms of like the visual elements, sort of on a character level, I suppose the characters all were quite kind of, not all of them, but quite a few of them had very noticeable standout facial features or things about their person that made them kind of a bit larger than life, I suppose. Maybe that's what those people look like in real life.
Yeah.
But I felt like that kind of obviously it was another sort of emphasis on the kind of comedic angle that they're trying to push. So there was that. I can't really think of anything else in terms of like the cinematography. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything that was sort of really, flashy in terms of that I noticed about camera moves or, something you went, oh, that's striking. There were some nicely composed shots. There's one, particularly where you have Beria sort of standing in the middle of the frame, and he's kind of only partially lit, and he's just this kind of looming shadow. I like that a lot because that tells you a lot about. I mean, he's pretty well established as a character anyway, but it was a nice little look. And there was another scene, and I'm forgetting the details, but it was outside in a park, and the scene unfolds there, and you have just a shot over the shoulder of a statue of Stalin that's kind of, it's sort of weird in that I think he's already dead by this point, but the sort of idea that he's still
looming over.
Yeah, that he's a sort of ghostly presence, and just like the way of doing things that he.
I mean, that's remind me. So that in that scene, I think that's where they're trying to pick up a doctor.
Yes.
So Stalin, he was basically dead. Well, he is dead. Or no, he's had a basically a severe stroke.
Yeah.
It's not looking good for him. And they try immediately get a doctor.
Yeah.
They take ages trying to decide whether to get a doctor, when to get a doctor, and then they've realised that they got kind of basically rid of, either executed all the good doctors, and
or sent them to the camps or whatever.
So in that scene there, this is one of the doctors, like quite an elderly doctor, a retired doctor that they're trying to sort of round up along with the other elderly doctors, and that was quite a funny scene, sort of when they had brought all these old elderly doctors who didn't really want to be there into the to come and sort of examine Stalin and give their kind of prognosis, which was not good. But so that was quite funny in terms of sort of getting these basically these old guys to sort of to come and give us a pointless
to state the bleeding obvious.
And actually another funny thing that I just remembered just when the conductor right at the start he collapses, I think, just before they're trying to do the re-record, the actual the re-performance, and then the recording that's supposed to exist but doesn't. And so the conductor faints and hits his head, I think. But they need a conductor to do this recording, and they sort of find this conductor, very quickly. But he's in his dressing gown and he's about to go to bed or something. Yeah. And they sort of drag him out of they escort him out of his apartment to come and conduct this piece of music late at night. And then he comes on stage still in his dressing gown. Yeah. It's just like really, that was quite funny.
Yeah, but when he gets the knock on the door, he thinks it's the knock on the door.
Yeah,
he thinks, "Oh, I'm,
I'm for it."
Yeah. And you actually see simultaneously, I'm sure this did not happen historically, but it's a funny but sick joke. You see some NKVD officers fetching someone else out of the building, and some of the nastier scenes, even if you don't actually see them do stuff, is the people coming for people in the night, and you kind of think, they did those scenes. Occasionally there's little bits that are slightly played for laughs, but mostly those are just chilling and horrible, and it's kind of like, gosh, this stuff used to go on, still does in some places.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, the film, yes, it's a comedy, but it doesn't dwell on it, but it doesn't shy away from the kind of brutality, really, and, the inhumaneness of that regime. And there are little moments in the film where it does sort of make you kind of stomach turn a bit.
Yeah, oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, even finishing off Beria at the end, there's kind of a bit where Svetlana, Stalin's daughter, essentially takes Khrushchev to task for the way he's done things, and he's one of the more, you can't really call him an honourable character, but his motives are probably some of the least suspect, in the sense, I mean, he wants the power, but you get the feeling that he's probably sincere about wanting fewer people to die in the future, whereas Beria tries to basically nix his idea for easing the purge in order to be more popular, but you kind of think, we totally see through through that. But it's not black and white, like, as far as the members of everyone's sort of hands are, covered in blood. And there's even the scene where Beria is in the process of being arrested. He's kind of saying, and I know that you had your hands in these people being executed. I've got stuff on all of you. And it's kind of like, he's doing it because he's, enraged about what's going on. But it was true. Everyone, I think Stalin was quite deliberate about getting everyone to be complicit.
Yeah. One character that I thought was going to have a bit more of a role, or you could say that she did have a prominent enough role, was the pianist at the start. And there's, in this concert at the start, there's a pianist, and basically she refuses to do the re-recording, and then she gets kind of the guy conducting the recording says, "I'll pay 20,000 rubles," and she says, "Yes, I'll do that." And then they're about to send the vinyl recording or hand it over to one of Stalin's guards, and then she sort of slips a note into the album cover, and the note basically is for Stalin, and it's basically kind of slagging him off, and sort of saying that you basically killed several members of my family, etc., etc.,
and hundreds of thousands of other people. You're a tyrant.
And he reads that, and then it's kind of in the film. It's not alluded to. Basically, he reads the note, and then he sort of has this stroke or this attack.
Yeah, he starts laughing, and then
and maybe that's Anyway, so that maybe that note was the onset of that, or triggered it. So she does reappear in the film later on a bit. I think at the funeral.
Well, she's playing. Yes,
she's playing that.
It's her gig.
Yeah, her gig. But I had a feeling because she's so prominent at the start, and she triggered that, and maybe that's just her role in the film. But I felt like there was maybe something missing with her. She wasn't included in sort of the ending and the sort of wrap up, and I don't know. There's so many strands in the film that it'd be quite hard to incorporate them all. But I just felt that almost for like a nice continuity piece, that would have been something worth kind of exploring. But obviously they could only work with what was in the novel.
Yeah, I mean it's a tricky one because they play quite fast and loose with other aspects of the historical narrative, so you kind of think, well, they could have bent it a little bit to give you some closure on that story. But again, I thought universally excellent performances, and she was very good. She sort of had this dignity that not a lot of other people in the really had. So that was kind of interesting. In terms of, well, just to wrap things up, how do you feel about this? Does it make you want to go and check out the graphic novel?
Yeah, I think I'd like to. I think I would kind of done it the wrong way round. It's always good to read the book and then go and see the film. But
yeah.
Now I'm interested to see sort of like how the film and the book or the graphic novels differ, and understand the comedy spin that Iannucci might have added to it.
Yeah.
Iannucci and as well as the other writers who are David Schneider and Ian Martin. They obviously bring some their own elements to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. On that point, how did this compare with other Armando Iannucci stuff for you? Is it of that kind of quality, or?
It's a bit different. So I mean the thing that I would is closest to. So there probably are little bits of Partridge, but it really is kind of like a thick of it, not spin-off, but similarities to the thick of it. Where I mentioned earlier, you got those sort of bits of banter, which I think Ian Martin brings, as well as Iannucci. But then it's also a lot of the thick of it. I'm thinking about especially the some of the specials that they did, like the Rise of the Nutters and the Spinners and Losers, where it is all about kind of jockeying and trying to sort of seize power and things that are sort of change very quickly between you think it's going to go one way, one person's going to seize power and then someone else is going to seize power. And I think that whole dynamic was kind of, he brought that spirit into this film. So I think there were kind of, I really like that kind of chaos, I suppose. I think that's really watchable. So I think it's certainly it's not a thick of it copy, but I enjoyed it for its it's in its own sort of context and on its own merit as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed a lot, but I came away from it just feeling quite shaken, which is I think it's quite an achievement for the film, in that I went into it knowing a lot of the history. I think it did a good job of, the gags are sort of thick and fast, and they kind of mix things up with the comedy of awkwardness and some good lines and stupid physical humor. But yeah, it does bring the sort of ghastliness and the seriousness in as well, and you just think, thank goodness that things aren't as bad as that. I mean, obviously Russia does not have by any means an ideal system of government now, but at least it's moved on from then, because it just doesn't bear thinking about, really. Sorry, I'm becoming completely inarticulate. How you said this was sort of a bit of an intro for you in terms of films about Russia. Does this experience make you want to watch other things, or are you thinking, if it's going to be about stuff like this, I might look elsewhere?
No, I think it's. To be honest, I don't know a lot about Russian history. I know bits and pieces, but I liked this because they could have done a film, more about. I think I said I thought the film might be about the general demise of Stalin and his kind of downfall, but actually. And I think there's probably already quite a few films on Stalin, quite a few books on Stalin. But actually this kind of level below him is actually more interesting. And that's probably why Iannucci and why the novelist sort of decided to focus on this, because it is slightly it's unmined territory. So I think actually, I am interested. I mean, everyone's sort of fascinated by these big kind of despots like Stalin and Hitler and the sort of the personality of them. But actually, I'm interested in the sort of the underlings, or the kind of people below that, and
Sure.
the kind of the whole kind of all their machinations and sort of how they survived
Or didn't in various cases.
Didn't survive. Yeah, how they tried to survive, or so I think that's pretty. In a way, that's kind of that's more relatable, I suppose, to the everyday kind of person, because you could probably see yourself in that kind of jeopardy.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are kind of relatable. I mean, Beria, I hope not. But Khrushchev, I mean, to an extent, Malenkov. I mean, Molotov is a bit weird in the sense that he has this sort of ideological sort of blinkers on, so you can't imagine quite what it would be like to be like that. But they seem much more sort of like relatable, incredibly flawed human beings. But it's interesting to see them not portrayed as utter monsters, because I think it's very easy when you're talking about people who've done unspeakably horrible things to just kind of, bracket them off and say, well, the rest of us don't have that potential in us. And I don't know, this is probably turning into a sort of a treatise or something, but you kind of think, no, you can't know how someone could, I think it's a case of, small steps and decisions, culminating in ending up like that, I guess. So it's thought provoking stuff, and I'm glad that they didn't make the characters cardboard cutout. There's lots of new ones. Okay, well, thanks very much, Matt, for joining us, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Okay, das Vidania, folks. So that's it for this episode, but before I go, I'd like to thank Sasha Ilukovic and the Highly Skilled Migrants for the use of their song Cold in our intro. You can find that song and the rest of their back catalogue on Bandcamp and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, please consider supporting us by leaving a rating at Apple Podcasts or at podchaser.com. That second one, Podchaser, even lets you rate individual episodes, so if this episode particularly stood out to you, you can let other listeners know that you enjoyed it. Recommending the show on social media is hugely helpful as well. If you can spare a moment or two to do that, it would really make my day. Thank you very much. Speaking of social media, please find us and say hi on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. You can also drop us a line at roostfalesunite@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.